Hello, and welcome to this panel where we will be discussing tech. Is it the answer? Tech is obviously a very important issue, and I understand that early on today a survey was carried out, and 94% of people participating in this conference said that they had learned a new tech skill. My name is Julia Haferkorn. I'm a senior lecturer at Middlesex University, and I'm the program leader of the MA Classical Music Business. My connection to tech is that I'm currently carrying out a research project with my colleagues Sam Leake and Brian Kavanagh, and we are looking into the monetization of live streamed concerts. So basically, how can musicians make money from live streaming? In January, we'll be asking musicians to fill in a survey about their experience and expectations of live streaming. And if you're interested, you can find out more at a project-specific website, which is livestreamingmusic.uk. Before we move on to our panelists, I wanted to encourage you to ask any questions that you might have using Slido, and we will then be able to see them during the session and pick them up. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the panel discussion, but if there's anything more needed, we can pick them up during the next hour. Also, if you're posting about the event on social media, please use the hashtag #empoweredmusician. I'll be introducing our panelists one by one, and I would like to start with Pippa Reid-Foster. Pippa is a teacher, a performer, and a composer. She plays the small Scottish harp, or clarsach, the penny whistle, and the piano. And during lockdown, Pippa was working on her new album, which is minimalist in style and will be available in the coming year. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, her tours to England, Scotland, and Finland have been cancelled, and she has had to move her instrumental teaching online. This is something she has recorded a talk about for ISM, which you can still find on SoundCloud. So Pippa, what has it been like to do instrumental teaching online?
Well, it has been interesting, to say the least. It's been an experience, and it's been a good experience, really good experience. At the start, it was a bit daunting, but it only took a couple of weeks to get into it and get going, and the students settled into it, and yeah, really, really good. I've had to change the way I teach a lot. I've realized that actually the way I taught before was very, very much music, playing all the time throughout the lesson, whereas now I tailor the lesson and make it more fun based during the half hour. And actually that during the half hour, I actually don't teach for more than a half hour lesson now. I've realized that actually more than half an hour on doing this is a lot for the student to concentrate through. So what we do is we do a little bit of playing, a little bit of fun warm-ups. I do a little bit of playing, and we do a bit of theory, and yeah, we have a bit of fun doing it. Yeah.
Excellent. Have the relationships with your pupils been different? Has that developed in a way you didn't expect? And if they're different, how are they different?
I think the relationships with the students, they're a lot more relaxed now. It's forced them just to come out of their shells a little bit more. Even though I saw them in school, they're a lot more relaxed in their home environments, a lot more relaxed. I'm seeing a lot of pets, actually, a lot of kittens and a lot of puppies and a lot of dogs, which that also relaxes them a lot. But yeah, the students are, I wouldn't say that it's hugely changed, but yeah, I definitely have a lot more relationship with the parents. They are way more involved than they were before, and they're getting to learn a lot as well, an awful lot, because I have a conversation with them at the start or at the end of the lesson, which is really good. Yeah,
that's very useful, I guess. And so do you teach mainly children, or do you have adult pupils as well?
I have a mixture. I have about 50 students, and I would say 3/4 of them are younger students, and I would say a quarter are adult students. So yeah, I've got a good mix, ranging from 5 right up to in your 80s. Yeah.
Amazing. What about technical issues or the technical setup? Has that been an issue with pupils or for yourself?
At the start, it was a bit of an issue, just getting the setup right. So making sure that you could clearly see the student. I still have a few who who think that they basically don't want to be in the picture. And I said, I need to see your face. I need to see that emotional side to your learning. So I do make sure I can see them, and make sure I can see, especially the harp. You need to make sure the harp is like visible, and the hands. Sometimes you get a harp straight on and you can't see anything. I can just see a head bobbing to the side, so you need to make sure they've got it. But they're so used to it now. They're tech savvy, these little ones, really tech savvy, which is great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But what happens then if it all goes wrong? So is that, has there been any frustration because of, say, buffering, or because somebody couldn't get online, or how do you handle those situations?
It happens. It does happen a lot, and we do pause, we freeze, and it's kind of second nature now. It happens, and we don't make it a big issue. We usually hang up and just call straight back and go straight in where we left off. And I mean, some calls you do find that it just is not working, and I just say, right, that's it, let's just leave it, and I'll owe them the lesson. So I give up a lot of my free time now, so say at the weekends, because I'm not going anywhere at the moment, so I will give up usually a Sunday afternoon to make up. So if my student hasn't had much of a lesson, then we'll make up for it at the weekend.
Yeah. See, this is one point that I find really interesting, because in theory, tech should mean that everything is more efficient, that we do things more quickly, because we don't have to travel, we just click a button and the student appears.
Yeah.
But is that the case? I mean, is it actually also some of the other side that using tech all the time is actually quite intense and potentially energy sapping? What is the experience?
Completely. I'm exhausted, completely exhausted. I'm a really early person. I always get up super early, but I don't actually start my teaching till mid-afternoon, and I don't finish till 9-10 o'clock at night, and that's hard work for me. And just being on the screen constantly. I mean, I have a few minutes between each student, but it is tiring. It takes a lot from you, an awful lot out of you. Yeah.
So would you say you work more now, or do you work less, or in terms of hours?
Teaching, I'm working more, definitely, because I've actually gained a lot more students, students from all over. I mean, I've got a few students worldwide, which is great, which I didn't have before. And I've actually got a lot more students who maybe just had a lesson once a month because they live quite far away, and now they have a lesson every week. So I'm teaching a lot more, and because I'm having to make up lessons as well, or I'm leaving a little bit of time between students, I'm finding that I'm working more, and I'm having to spread it out through the week a little bit more. So I'm working 5 days now, 6 to 8 hours a day, which is a lot.
Yeah. So I think this is one of the interesting points which comes up again and again in terms of the advantage of tech, is that you can transcend the geographical borders. So for a musician to potentially reach an international audience, but also for a music teacher to actually take on students which beforehand were just too far to travel if you had wanted to do the session in person. We have a question for you, which I'm just going to read out. It says, I'm a part-time peripatetic teacher and have been teaching online since the start of lockdown. I have found that students have improved massively. Have you experienced the same?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. They are so much more focused, because you're forced to focus because you're really having to concentrate on the screen. And it's almost like they're enjoying their lessons more. They find it a really fun experience, especially the wee ones. And then the older students, because it's so intense at school at the moment, I don't know if other people are experiencing this, but my students have got a lot of pressure with schoolwork at the moment. They find their lessons just so rewarding and just so much fun, relaxing. And so they're spending a lot of time on their practice. And yeah, and I think the way I'm teaching now as well has changed, so it's making it more fun for the student, which is inspiring them to do more practice as well. And also exams, I don't push exams, but I have put a lot of my younger ones through because it's given them something to focus towards, and they really enjoy it. So it's really pushed them to practice. So I've put quite a few through this year during lockdown. It's been, they've loved it. They've not even taken a blink. They've just done it on Zoom. There, boom, done.
Amazing. Sounds good. And also another upside, I guess, of tech, the kind of focus then. I wanted to ask you, obviously you're a performer and a composer and a teacher. Has the pandemic allowed you to be more flexible, I guess, because of tech? So, and in terms of income as well, is it that you are potentially able to do more teaching now to balance income that you might have lost from the cancelled tours?
Yeah, absolutely. I can do more teaching. I can, but then the children can only have lessons. There's only so many of the youngsters I can take on, because you can only teach them when they finish school, and then they can't have lessons too late, and then they generally don't want lessons at the weekend. So I can only take on a certain amount of the younger ones, but definitely the older ones have definitely taken on a lot more adults during this, which has been fantastic. I would definitely say, though, it's not covering the cost of the gigs that I've lost and the tour, and I've lost massively, but I'm so lucky to have the teaching. I'll never moan about how much teaching I do ever again. I'm really lucky. Yeah.
Okay, good. We actually have another question. Do you think online teaching is here to stay as part of music teaching toolkit, and will mainstream progression look different in future as a result? For example, not just grade exams.
Absolutely. I will definitely be doing a lot more of this, an awful lot more, and I'll take on more international students as well, and I will continue to do it. And I'm not scared of this anymore. I hated anything to do with this kind of thing beforehand, but with it, yeah, it's second nature now. It's really easy.
Fantastic.
What was the second half of the question? Sorry.
It's will mainstream progression look different in future as a result? So not just graded exams, I think it means.
I think so. I don't think exams are. I don't personally push students through exams. I think the main thing is that they're learning an instrument and they're having fun doing it. Is that answering the question? No.
Okay, and one last question before we move on. Do you find different age groups react differently to online teaching?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would say the adults find it quite hard. They're quite shy, I would say, the adults, especially the older adults. The little ones struggle slightly because I can't physically show them. You need to put your hand here. So I'm having to explain. That takes a little bit more time, because you're having to say, right, instead of me just going, right, do this, do that, show them, I'm having to go, right, do this, do that, and then they're still not getting it. And then you sometimes have to get the parents involved. Can you just put their finger on a red string? That's the one we want to be on. Yeah. But
excellent.
The older ones are the older students, kids are absolutely fine. Great. It's nothing. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for sharing your insights, Pippa. Very much appreciated. Thank you. And if there are any more questions for Pippa, you can always put them in the chat, and then we get back to them at the end of the session. So now let's move on to our next panelist, Sandra Schembri. And Sandra is the CEO of the UK's largest music therapy charity, which is Nordoff Robbins. And Nordoff Robbins works across the UK. They have 13 regional hubs providing free music therapy sessions. And importantly, the charity actually works in 3 areas. They educate music therapists, they deliver music therapy, but they also, very importantly, carry out research into music therapy. Because of the pandemic, most of the charity's fundraising events and activities have had to be cancelled. So if you can, please do consider donating to their Christmas appeal, which will ensure that the charity can continue their work as before. Sandra, so what has it been like to do music therapy online? Sandra, you still got your microphone off.
Brilliant. So you can tell I'm not tech savvy from the first off. So
we all do it.
It's been a mixed bag, actually. So our therapists have told us that it is useful for some, it's neutral for others, but for some it's actually been negative. So online music therapy is still very much in its infancy. You mentioned there about the exhaustion And that for our therapists, we've actually had to do fewer sessions in a day due to not only the physical setup, but also the mental capacity it takes for that incredible focus online through the therapy sessions. So we use a digital where helpful approach rather than a digital first approach. So again, one of the questions there was about a toolkit. And what we've come to, like 9 months later, what we've realized is we would like it to be a part of our toolkit going forward, but it won't necessarily be the first thing we reach for. So we're very, very person-centered. We work with people. And for us, it's about what's going to be right for that person at that time. So an example is where it's kind of neutral is how when we work with people with mental health conditions, there's a latency in online. And you can actually, so you really get stuck at music turn taking, and turn taking is fine, session or two, but it can get quite frustrating. And actually you don't meet your therapeutic goals. So after about 8 sessions, it's not really right. Whereas for a child with quite severe autism, what we found is how they use a screen is very particular. Their screen, they're in control. So they are interacting with music in a way which is pre-recorded. They can stop, start, fast forward, put it down, pick it back up. It's ultimate control because they don't want the world to change around them. So for them, it's a very safe place. And what we found is trying to their therapist to try and meet them online and come into this world and all of a sudden pop up on their screen, even though their parents are talking them through what's going to happen. It's actually anxiety inducing and it's quite stress inducing. So what we found is for some children, actually, it's incredibly negative experience and it can cause stress within the whole household. So certain people we've said, okay, we're not going to engage. But for those individuals, what we found is pre-recorded musical interventions have worked very well because they can choose when and how they interact with them, pause, control, fast forward. And that was quite an eye-opener for us. But the way we found it to be very useful for individuals is young adults with profound and multiple learning difficulties. If they have a carer that's quite tech savvy, we found that online sessions can actually be really beneficial, and that exceeded our expectations. So that was actually wonderful. But there's a particular part that we weren't expecting, which is online choir. We have an online choir, an inclusive choir. And again, if anyone's been on an online choir during lockdown, you're all on screens, depending on how many people, there could be like 50 to 100 people on a session. And you're hearing the music, but you're not actually in the music in the same way you are in the room in a choir. But what we found is for some people, it's been an absolute lifeline because they have already been very excluded from society. Shielding has done even more so. They're even more excluded. And they've been able to be very included in that choir by the way the therapist interacts with them.
Yeah, so very much a mixed picture, and it sounds like you have to take a very nuanced approach to who it works for and who it doesn't work for. You've said a little bit about online music making, but how does that work? Is it all call and response, or how does this work? I was particularly thinking of the lag and so on. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you might have gotten around some of the tech issues, or not? Or does it matter even? Does it matter?
So again, it depends very much on the person. So call and response is the most obvious way to do it. But what we've also found is songwriting can work very well, so that you're creating a piece of music together, but you can't really play it together. What we have managed to do with some people with the songwriting is then, okay, I'll record a part, you record a part, the therapist would splice that together. So the next session they come to, it's like, okay, this is what we've done thus far. Now what are we going to do together? So there's this sense of creation. But rather than the creation happening real time in that session, it's happening over 4, 5 or 6 sessions. So it's kind of an extended creation process. But what people have told us, again, was an unintended positive consequence, is they've got this thing they can hold on to and say, I made this, in a way that they wouldn't have in a live interaction sessions. They have that experience and they hold that experience, but they now have this thing, or their family have this thing that they can point to and show people, which again was a lovely positive unintended consequence.
Yeah, absolutely. What about those of your clients or patients who don't have tech? How do you get around that? Can you get around that?
So there's those that don't have tech, there's those that actually can't and won't engage with tech. And then there's those that have tech, but their carers have no idea how to engage with tech. So there's all these varying degrees. If we think about care homes in particular, what we found is you need a conduit, you need a tech conduit who doesn't mind having a go, plugging it in, whether it's the, you know, the smart speaker, or whether it's sitting there with the laptop, getting Zoom up and actually being in the room, helping the person interact. We still need that intermediary to help the music making happen. There is a massive problem, and the inequality is shown with those that have access to tech, but not just access to tech. You know, the speed of broadband, how many people are in the house, and how many people are trying to do all these things in the house. So it's been a real challenge for a lot of people that already, there's an inequity for them already.
Yes, it's quite a complex issue. So it's not just about having equipment or not having equipment. It's also about knowledge and support, and also very much who else is in the household, who else needs the broadband as well.
But there's also the thing about time. So if you think about a family where both parents are working, maybe even 2 jobs, we're then saying to them, we'd like you to be a conduit for your child's session. They're looking at us going, we'd love to, but how? So again, it's very complex, very complex.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask, we already talked a little bit, or Pippa's talked about the strain that being in front of a screen can cause as well. So how are the music therapists coping with all the screen time? Has that had an effect on how therapy is done? You've already mentioned some of it, but, you know, or how much therapy is being offered in terms of number of sessions, not just how it's delivered, but how long are they and how many sessions are being delivered now compared to beforehand?
So I think in the beginning, it was exhaustion, absolute exhaustion for our therapists. They all keep reflective journals, and when you look back to the beginning, it was just because we're trying to read all these cues off the screen, so the attention, the focus, but also you're only focused on a very, very, very narrow area, a field of vision, but also a field of sound in a way for the therapist. So they're trying to get all these cues that they can't get. It has got slightly better, but it's never going to be the same rounded experience as being face-to-face in the room with people. So what we've done is we've decided to try and do fewer sessions where possible. I get the shortening of sessions as well. But also we're trying to engage with people in a group setting that may not necessarily have been ready for a group setting, usually when if we're seeing them one-to-one, so that they can have a bigger experience than the very focused attention, which for some people can be quite stress-inducing on a screen. But the therapists themselves, we've been doing a lot of work on well-being, and it is that we've just done a piece of work where we're focusing on, well, are we tired? Are we exhausted? Or actually, are we at risk of burnout? You know, what are the signs going on? And it's a real risk. So it's something we are monitoring, and it's across the music therapy community. It's something we're watching.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Sandra. That's been super interesting to see how music therapy is coping with the move to the online platform. Let's now move on to our next panelist, and that is John Williamson. John is a bass player who has performed jazz, funk, big band, pop and avant-garde music. But interestingly, his academic background is in physics, where he has published numerous research papers. At the moment, he is doing an MA in jazz performance at the Royal Academy of Music, which was made possible through support from Help Musicians. Now, during lockdown, John made use of his physics background, and he investigated online real-time music, or ORM, software. And he's interviewed a series of experts, and he wrote an article for the ISM on the topic, which is available on the ISM website. Hi, John. And my first question would be, what prompted you to investigate online music making?
Well, hello, and thanks for having me. I think it's a feature of the type of music that I tend to work in, which is jazz, and it's a type of music where the rhythmic interaction is very important. So the rhythmic hookup between bass and drums, for example, is a very important part. But if you try to record to a metronome, for example, okay, so say you're trying to collaborate remotely, and you know, one person records against the metronome, the other person records against that, and so on and so on. That really kills the sort of organic feel of jazz music. So it's a type of music that is particularly ill-suited to online music making unless there is this real-time component to it. So perhaps I can just do a quick demonstration with you, Julia, actually. I'll count the beats of a bar, 1, 2, 3, 4, in time, roughly. And if you can try and say the 1 of the next bar, okay, so I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4 in time, and you say 1 when the next project would be, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so hopefully, and I could tell, and hopefully those watching can tell, that the gap is nowhere near a crotchet. There's this inherent lag that's part of Zoom and Skype and all these other softwares that we tend to use. So when the lockdown started, lots of my friends in the jazz world would say, you know, can we have a remote rehearsal over Zoom? Can we have a play together? Because jazz musicians, more than any other, they love just going to each other's houses and having an informal play, you know. And so people tried to do it over Zoom, and it was impossible, you know. So I saw some videos from a guy called Dan Tepfer in New York. I spoke to Sam Leek, who's a friend of Dan's and a colleague of yours as well, and they brought to my attention this type of software that does try to enable real-time online music collaboration. So, you know, where I could count 4 beats and you would be perfectly in sync with me, and we can play in real time together, facilitated by that. And it turns out that it is possible with certain caveats. So I just thought it was really interesting to look into and to see what was possible.
Excellent. So can you talk a little bit about what technical setup do you need to make online music making possible?
Yeah, so I think you fundamentally on the audio side, you only need the kind of stuff that you might use to record at home. So you need a microphone or a pickup on your instrument, depending what it is that you can play into. You need something to plug that into on your computer. So a lot of people would use something called an audio interface, which plugs in via USB into their laptop. So on the audio side, it's identical to standard home recording that lots of people would have tried. The part that helps it to be real time is basically dependent on your internet speed. So that the real time aspect comes from the fact that, in contrast to Zoom, something like this, you know, we have a quite uninterrupted, clear conversation here, right? But that's because Zoom is doing lots of background error checking, okay? So if the data that represents, you know, my face and my voice gets lost, then Zoom is in the background, is waiting for that data to come again. It's doing lots of corrections in the background. So that presents a smooth experience, but the cost is that takes time. So that's where the lag comes from. This ORM, or online real-time music software, of which there are many brands, I suppose, it works by doing away with all of that checking. So it just is essentially blindly firing data across the internet. It doesn't check whether it arrives. It doesn't check that the data comes in the right order. And so that gets rid of a large part of the latency. The downside is that it is then very dependent on the internet quality. So if you have a good internet connection from you to your partner that you're playing with, if the physical proximity is within the hundreds of miles, you know, something like that, then the internet can be good enough that that approach to data, the non-error checked transmission of data, works well, and that can remove latency and let you play together. So the technical requirement on that side is essentially to have a good enough internet connection on both ends, and something about geographical proximity. So even with the best current technology, going from London to New York across the big transatlantic fiber optic cable is not possible, you know. So it's basically internet speed, which is the key thing. And I think that's where it fell down initially. When people looked into this software, they tried to use Wi-Fi, which already causes too much latency to be useful. So lots of people tried it and then bounced off because it was impossible to make it work. You have to actually use what's called an Ethernet, or a wired connection to your router, for example, that kind of thing. But that's all explained in the article that I've written in detail.
Okay, so in summary, basically, it very much depends on your internet connection, on your speed.
Yeah.
Try using an Ethernet cable if you can.
Yeah, exactly.
Different software packages for real-time music making. You wouldn't recommend any in particular?
Not particularly. I mean, so there's Jack Trip that we use, and I'll show you an example for that in a minute via when we talk about these quick videos that Sam and I made. So we use Jack Trip. There's one called Jamulus, which is quite popular. There's Soundjack. So they all have these different names, you know, none of which particularly swish-sounding names. But the technology is more the same than it is different. So they all depend on the same underlying technology. Most of them are free. That's worth saying, I think. So you know, there's no additional cost overlay, and they're not completely plug and play, you know, but it's no more difficult than learning a bit about, say, Logic or some kind of home recording package like that. It's no more difficult than learning how to do your taxes, you know. So it's definitely possible.
Okay, so bringing it back to internet speed and connections and so on. When we talked earlier, you said that to make music together successfully online, the technology needs to be on the same level as high-speed financial banking or professional gaming. So what do you think could be done to make that technology available for the music sector as a whole?
Yeah, I think it depends, right? So the analogy with high-speed finance and professional gaming comes from the fact that those are both areas where any lag or latency on the internet is you know, equals lost dollars, so to speak. So you know, they really push it to an extreme case. I should say that most consumer internet these days is possible to have real-time experiences in music within geographical proximity of a few hundred miles. So you don't need to be paying £50 a month for the best internet connection you can afford. But in terms of looking at transatlantic collaborations, that sort of thing, that's the kind of area where, you know, because of the speed of transmission through a fiber optic cable, which is how we communicate with the US, you know, there's an inherent limit on the speed there. And that could only be overcome when perhaps you know, the global internet switches to a satellite-based communication, you know, because then it's a lot faster. But I don't want to put people off too much, because you know, I just have plain old internet of someone in London. You know, it's nothing special, and you can check your internet as I describe in my article, and check that it's feasible. You know, it has decent speeds that are going to enable you to at least give it a go. And that,
I think SK Shlomo will want to talk about this as well and his experience.
Sure,
We'll come to him in a bit, but no, really, that's really interesting. We do have a question, which is a general question, but how can performers increase their knowledge of tech? Where should they be looking for?
Well, for my particular corner of it, read my article, I think, because there's not much other stuff about online real-time music specifically. So that would help. For tech in general, I would defer to people like Shlomo and people who do a lot more kind of home-based recording and mixing and stuff than I do. You know, I'm sure there's plenty of good guides out there. Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
And what do you think could be the future application of, or future applications of online?
Okay, yeah.
Once the pandemic is over, could online music making still be useful?
Yeah, I think it could. So maybe I can play, Paul, let's just go straight to the second video that I sent in. But I'll just show you an example of me and my colleague, Sam Leek, just having a quick rehearsal over this real-time thing. I just want to show you what's possible. So if you can play that, it's quite a high-tempo tune, you know, it's rather rough, but you can see how we can keep in time quite steadily at quite a high tempo. So if you can go ahead and play that. Okay, yeah, so that's an example of just, we were trying to push the limits essentially, because that's about 280 BPM, and that's as, you know, that's as fast as I can play, or faster, you know, depending on how my lockdown chops are. But that shows that it's feasible, right, to play at sort of any tempo you could want to in good enough for real time. So one thing you can use it for, and that we used it for during lockdown, is just to carry on playing with other people. when you're not allowed to do it physically. So that was the core use that we used it for. And in that particular example, we were recording separately on each end of the track, right? So you'll notice that the audio, aside from Zoom transmission here, the audio is completely smooth. Okay, so it's possible to record really high quality audio on both ends, the same as you would record in your home studio. So that's something to say. So that opens up, for example, multi-track recording, but doing it at the same time. I've already spoken at the start about how jazz is not very well suited for multi-track recording. You have to use the metronome and it really sucks the life out of it. So that's one thing. You can do this kind of live multi-tracking. If I had a drummer that I wanted to play with, I couldn't be there in person, I and the drummer could record together, and we would hope to have a reasonably good rhythmic hookup. So that's one thing. I guess rehearsals is a good idea. So if you're on a tour around the country, but you have this kind of relatively complicated music you're playing, and you have to use a substitute bass player or a substitute drummer for one of the gigs, you can record, you can rehearse in real time, from a distance. So you don't have to wait for the person to get to the gig and then do a quick run through in the sound check. I think the teaching side of it would be really interesting, because obviously there's a limit on how you can teach if all you can do is play one after the other. Okay. So it would be helpful to be able to click along like that and have someone play in time, or to accompany a student. So you're playing piano and they're playing a flute part or a clarinet part or something, you can accompany in real time. So I think those are all interesting uses. And then Sandra spoke about the lag time in music therapeutic applications. So there's all these situations, I suppose, where just getting rid of that lag would change the way that we can use the internet in music, and I think those would persist afterwards. From the software side, it's just a matter of one of these packages getting a big enough user base, or having some engagement and becoming easy enough to use. There's a guy called Doug Hunt who works in London, and he rose to prominence by live streaming a full 4-piece band. They did a whole concert and they recorded a vinyl record live. So he's a kind of sound man for this kind of online stuff. But he's interested in developing his own solution that is like Zoom, but for ORM. So something that really makes it plug and play.
I think this is really the way it's going to go. It's sort of the technology will have to be developed more, and we'll have to see where it's all going to lead. But it's fantastic that some of the some online music making in real time is already possible. So John, thank you very, very much for your insights, which I'm sure are very much appreciated by all the viewers, especially those who have not done online real-time music making before. So now let's move on to the next panelist. We've got SK Shlomo, and Shlomo is a beatboxer. He's a producer and a live looper, and he has collaborated and performed with artists such as Björk, Damon Albarn, Lynn Ellie, Jarvis Cocker, and Rudimental, and he's played the main stages at Glastonbury multiple times. His latest project is called Rave to the Moon, which is an online rave and charity event on New Year's Eve. So welcome, Shlo. And my first question to you is about your live stream. So you live stream every Thursday evening at 8:30 on Twitch, on YouTube and Facebook. And how has that been going?
Yeah, it's been really good. There's something really special about live streaming, and I used to do it when I could, before, when I used to be allowed to go and do shows, and I'd normally be doing something like 140 shows a year, something like that. So I'm touring a lot, but I'd still try and squeeze in a live stream when I could. But and I always enjoyed it. But obviously now it's my only real platform to reach my audience. So I do it every week, and I absolutely love it. I love the way that I can express myself in a way that in any way I like. I don't have any kind of other stakeholders telling me how it has to be, or any other restrictions. And I also love how much I'm learning. Every week I'm geeking out and thinking, okay, how can I raise my game even further, make this more interactive, make it more in tune with the audience. And the final part of it is just, you are so in tune with your audience. Like when you go and do a show, if you're traveling around the world, you don't really know what's going to happen, who's going to be there every night, and you don't really know, they applaud. But with a live stream, they can control the show. You can kind of make it open and interactive and collaborative, and to me, that's really exciting.
That sounds fascinating. So in terms of interacting with the audience, what does that look like? What do you do to engage your audience?
I've been messing around with so many different ways. Like I tried to keep it really varied, but I mean, the first big live streaming project I did during lockdown, it was called Homeschool Beatbox Adventures. And we did this 5 weeks kind of mass beatbox lessons where we were trying to raise a load of money for the NHS. And we had loads of like famous people came on, and that kind of really helped elevate it. We had like Bill Bailey came on and Bastille came on, all these different people. And we had this 6-week course where we were encouraging families to learn beatboxing, but more importantly, to connect with each other and to express themselves. So we wrote this anthem over the 6 weeks. And then we released a charity single. We had over 100 families all performing on this video together. And that reached 200,000 households around the world, which was just, at the time, like, was just absolute madness. And it was really interactive. So we used loads of ways to kind of keep people really engaged. Like I was set creative challenges every week. We had a Zoom room. So I had like an audience with 50 families on it every week. And we'd use like live polling all the way through. So it was always like, it was their show. It wasn't my show. It was a communication. And then off the back of that, I just started playing around even more with all the different ways I could interact. So like sometimes I just do quite a casual live stream, but on a Thursday, but I always try and involve other people. I'm kind of done with just like live streaming on my own, just staring at a camera. So quite often I'll have a friend or another artist or another DJ or someone kind of jump on with me, and we'll make a tune together, or we'll have a jam together, and the audience gets to choose, you know, what music we're making or what style we're doing. And we're doing lots of these virtual raves, which is something that the demand for this is terrifying. I'm not gonna lie, it's just kicked off. Started doing these DJ raves, you know, remotely, and you know, people get dressed up like they're gonna go out. We've been giving away prizes for the highest step count, and on the last big one we did, someone did 17,500 steps, which is like it's all the way up Mount Everest and then almost all the way back down again in their house. So that's why we're doing Rave to the Moon, which to me is like the most ambitious project, one of the most ambitious projects I've ever tried to do. So on New Year's Eve, we've got this amazing lineup. We've got like Basement Jacks, Mr. Scruff, Radio 1 DJs, all kinds of people performing on this live stream. But it's really, really interactive. So people can step for charity. And the goal is we're going to reach over 500,000 steps in one night, which is the very, very rough distance from Earth to the Moon. And anyone can do it. Anyone can fundraise for any charity they want. It's kind of like a marathon, but it's a rave-a-thon. So yeah, for me, it's about, this lockdown has given my brain a chance to really have mad ideas, but actually pull them off really quite quickly, because people are around, people are excited, people want new ways to kind of connect with the world.
Yeah, I find it absolutely fascinating because when lockdown started, what put off a lot of musicians is the lack of interaction and the lack of emotional response from the audience. And what put off a lot of live music attenders is that they said, oh, we don't get the vibe from the room. We don't really know, you know, what others are feeling. You don't get the joint emotional response. But it's kind of moved on from that. And I think you do that extremely well. And you take a very innovative approach in terms of saying, okay, so how can we engage? You know, what can we do to make ourselves feel connected, you know, amongst performers, but also within the audience? So I think that sounds absolutely fascinating. So when you, do you make a point out of always performing onto Zoom so you see some faces of your audience?
Yeah. Right from the beginning, I decided I was done with, because I used to just live stream and kind of go straight out on, you know, YouTube or Facebook or whatever, and it would just be me with a camera, and then the only feedback I'd get would be the comments and the little stream of hearts that goes up the side of the screen, which is lovely, but it didn't really feel anything like being on stage. There's just such a dynamic when you're on stage and the crowd are there with you, and it's live and it's electric and it's so exciting. And so yeah, during lockdown I decided I'm done with just doing it solo. And I was trying to think of other ways that I could bring people on. So yeah, it started off with the Zoom room that we had for Homeschool Beatbox Adventures, and then it's kind of got bigger. So the last big rave we did, the last big rave from home we did, I was DJing in front of a giant video wall. We did it in this incredible studio called Subfrantic, who basically had to really pivot, and they've created this incredible like live streaming space. And I had this huge 3-meter high video wall, 3D, so it's like 2 video walls at an angle, so that created like a 3-dimensional space. And we had 250 people raving from home behind me on this screen, and that was so exciting because I could kind of, it's hard to explain, but I could kind of move around this space and I could see people interact with them, and they could see me interacting with them. And that energy, like if you do something and you see people dancing, you see people having fun, you see people expressing themselves, it's still strange. I'm not going to lie. Like, it still kind of has a sadness to it. Like, all of these events, like, you know, even what we're doing right now, it's not the same as what we would have done, but there's also a real energy and joy to it. And I think that's what we're all craving right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just a way of looking at different ways of communicating and getting together and so on. It does make me think of money, though, because tech is also very expensive. So many musicians will kind of listen and say, oh, gosh, that sounds amazing. I'd love to do that. But, you know, I don't have the tech equipment, or I don't have access to that kind of tech. So it just led me on to think about monetization as well. So do you think it is possible to make money from live streaming for musicians?
Well, I see different models. So I see you got your kind of your Sam Smiths and your kind of huge big name artists who do this big announcement saying, I'm doing a live stream and you can buy tickets and it's going to be a big event, and all of their fans just go whoosh and buy the tickets, and there's money, and then there's a bit of an industry there. But for people who don't have that kind of profile, like there's just no interest in that. Like, if I said to people, I'm doing a live stream and you could buy tickets, I don't think I'd sell one ticket. So for me, I've always tried to make the content completely free, make sure my audience is getting the content for free, because it's such a noisy atmosphere. Like, I watch a lot of Twitch. I love going on Twitch just to watch DJs and musicians and gamers, and but there's just such a noisy platform. There's always so much stuff happening live. I rarely watch a show for more than a few minutes because I jump around. So trying to get someone to buy a ticket for that, for me, that isn't going to work. So the way I monetize things is through partnerships. So I do like a monthly music tech live stream. So for that, I charge a very small fee to be in the Zoom room. It's £5 to join that. It's kind of a token fee, and that's just to be honest, that's just to make sure people actually show up, because when you give people a free ticket, they don't always show up. And anyone can watch the live stream for free. But then I do like brand giveaways. So we've been giving away a pair of these Yamaha monitors that I use, and on the next episode we're giving away a Roland loop station. So I'm connecting with brands and I'm giving them a platform to reach the people who really want to know about their kit. So it works for everybody. And then the other thing is, like, the more you innovate, the more you create, the more you tell your story, the more likely you're going to get a chance to get paid to do it. So yeah, I feel like we shouldn't try and let the cost of the tech get in the way. Like, that sounds a bit like an excuse. Like, the very first live streams I was doing, I literally just had a laptop, and if you can't afford a laptop, I totally understand, but you might have a smartphone. You can do it with a smartphone. Don't let that kind of daunting cost or technicality of it put you off. The audience don't really care how shiny it looks. They just want to see you. They want to see you do your music. They want to hear you tell your story. And that is so much more important than how much it costs or how fancy it looks.
Yeah, very wise words. I think it is ultimately it's always about communication, isn't it? And communication can be done via a phone. It doesn't have to be a very elaborate tech. So I think that's fair enough. That's really interesting. Thank you so much. I mean, so many very interesting things. I was going to ask you about lag as well and so on. I don't know if you want to say something about that, if that's an important issue to you or not.
Yeah, I mean, I was fascinated to read John's article, so hats off to you, John. That was really great, just to kind of outline what you can do with ORM. I was in that category of people that John mentioned at the beginning of his talk there, about how a lot of people had a go and it just didn't work and they gave up. And I gave up on the idea of being able to jam in real time. However, there's some really great platforms that I've been experimenting with on my Thursday streams. Not the same as John, so not trying to do like a jazz thing where there's no grid and there's no metronome and you can hear each other at exactly the same moment in time. There's a few platforms I've been playing with. So one's called Soundtrap, which is more like a DAW, so like a garage band or something, where you can more than one person can work on it at the same time. Like, if you've ever used Google Docs or something like that, you know how other people can edit the document and you can see their edits, and it's really exciting. Like, that's been around for years. I still get excited about that, but we do that. We tried doing that on Soundtrap. That was interesting. There's another one called Splice, which means you can connect up Ableton or Logic or any DAW with someone else. So every time you make an edit, it appears on their side. So it's not actually real time as in at the exact same time, but if you're working on a track or making a remix, we do this a lot in our live streams, like the audience chooses what tune we're going to remix and we just mess around and we just work together. That's really, really fun. And then the third one, I love to use this one, it's really exciting. It's called Endless with 3 S's, and that's a live looping app. So I'm a live loop, my background is as a live looping beatboxer. I was a world looping champion. I'm very proud of that, thank you very much. But we use this app called Endless, where you can jam with other people in actual real time. So like, every time you record a loop into the app, it pops up on your other people's screen, on the other people's version of the app, and you can have unlimited people join that. You know, when we've gone live and we've said, all right, everyone watching jump in, it very quickly turns into chaos. But what I quite often do is just have one partner and we're jamming together, and suddenly it just feels like you're not alone. You can really get into the zone. You can really lose yourself in music in a way where you're not just on your own, someone else is part of it. And that is massive to me for my well-being, for my mental health. Like it hit me so hard not being able to be up on stage, but really not being able to interact with humans musically, like, is part of what I do. I've done it every week of my life since I was a tiny child. So this is really helping me patch that hole a tiny bit.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, again and again, we keep coming back to it. It is about communication, and music, ultimately, music making is about communication. But what I'm also hearing is that in answer to questions from the audience is it's really something that everybody needs to explore individually, because it depends on your genre. It depends what you want to do with the tech as well. So brilliant. Thank you so much, Shlo. That was really, really interesting. Thank you. I also wanted to mention that Shlo will be performing at 1:15 today, and he will also give a music tech masterclass where you can pick up some tips and tricks about live looping. So that's wonderful. Do join that if you can. Thank you, Shlo. And our next panelist is Luke Hebblethwaite. And Luke is the Insight and Innovation Manager for UKI, and UKI is the UK's body for the games industry. He's also set up two great and really useful websites. So one is for games composers, which is gamescomposers.co.uk. And the other one, called gamesmap.uk, shows organizations involved in the game sector across the UK. Welcome, Luke. And I wanted to ask you about the game sector and how has it been affected by the pandemic?
Yeah, so well, thank you for having me. And yeah, so my day job, you know, my sort of lengthy job title there is a sort of long-winded way of saying my job is to look at the sort of the economics, the diversity and the health of the games industry, especially in the UK, but also globally. I think, you know, we've been fairly lucky compared to some of the other creative industries, I think, in that we haven't been as affected in the same way that, you know, obviously music or theatre has been by the pandemic. You know, we don't have venues that have been closed. We tend to be online and digital, and to make games, you basically need a computer and the internet. So, you know, we've shifted over to remote work fairly, you know, easily in that sense. So the industry part's happening. You've probably read some of the stories in the paper about, you know, it being sort of boom time for the games industry because everyone's at home playing video games in their, you know, their newly found, you know, hours of spare time, which I guess, you know, it's partly true. I think we saw a bit of a bump at the start, but there was a couple of sort of big titles that got launched, you know, just when we all went into lockdown in the UK. So that was a bit of a headline time. But generally, I think, you know, we're in good health, sort of sales wise. But we're not, you know, it's not stratospheric. It's a small rise, and it tends to be with those kind of sort of well-known blockbuster games rather than the sort of broader diversity of the market. But yeah, so it's an industry where things are still happening, I think. So you know, it doesn't mean it's not an interesting time, of course.
Yeah, interesting time for everybody. So one other aspect I wanted to ask you about is what can the music sector learn from the game sector in terms of tech, or more specifically, and this links into what Shlo was saying. So in particular, do you think that the Twitch model, where live streams are often monetized through subscription, so either you watch it for free or you subscribe to specific people putting their streams on, could that work for the music sector, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think with you know, if you look at you know, the majority, I guess, of content that's on a platform like Twitch is generally people streaming themselves playing games or game-related content. And I think one of the things that really stands out for me about Twitch as a platform is it's all about engagement with that audience. You know, in the games world, you know, the people, you know, are playing the games, but they're continually interacting with the people that are watching them, whether in the chat or whether through things that come up on screen and so on. And I think it's about understanding how you're going to have that interaction, how you're going to build that community. A lot of what Shlomo was talking about there, about, you know, creating a way to visualize that audience so that it doesn't feel like you're yourself talking into a screen, you know, with nothing coming back to you. In the games world, you know, streamers have their own language and their own memes and all this kind of stuff that helps keep all that going on. I think, you know, and that's going to depend hugely on the different kinds of musicians that you are. You know, as you say, if you're Sam Smith and you're going to do a one-off mega concert, that's one way of monetizing. But for, you know, for the vast majority of musicians, it's about, you know, are you going, you know, there's a, you know, with, I guess, you know, repeating to some extent what Shlomo was saying, you know, it's about this commitment to doing something regularly, or having a kind of sustainable set of events that occur that, you know, that have their own flavor, that feels unique to you. And I think it's about those things really, and engaging in platforms like that.
Yeah, I think you make an excellent point about like the regularity, because on Twitch you would have to subscribe to somebody. So the challenge for musicians would be, and I am aware, of course, that some musicians are already on Twitch, but it is this thing where they have to, it's like a concert series or like a series of gigs where you have to keep offering something for it to be worthwhile for people to subscribe to it, which can work. But then again, it is about engagement as well, I'm sure. What other tips would you have for composers or performers or musicians in general who are interested in getting into the game sector?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question I've had a lot recently. So before I was in the games industry, I spent a lot of time in the music industry. I was about 8 years in the music industry, and I've been a musician all my life. And since doing things like the gamescomposers.co.uk website, I've had this question a lot, really. I think my sort of general advice for musicians who perhaps aren't working in games already is that, you know, it's about understanding what you want to do in games. Games is not one thing. You know, there are games at all kinds of different scales, what we call AAA games, which are kind of the blockbuster games, which are, you know, the sort of things you'll see adverts for on the telly, Fallout, Assassin's Creed, those kind of things. They're very, very competitive to be the composer for that, and they're, you know, very top end names, The Flight, Enon's, people like that, Lorne Balfe. So that, you know, if that's you, that's great, and, you know, good luck getting those gigs. But I think for the, you know, there's a huge wealth of other games out there, you know, across what we call the indie market, which is independently made games for smaller businesses. There's lots of things at the mid scale. There's a huge diversity of mobile games out there, and I think, you know, it's about engaging with the people that make those and the communities around those games. That is the real key to getting into it. I think one of the advantages we have here in the UK is that, like the fact that we have a world-leading music industry, we're very lucky to have a world-leading games industry as well. So there's a lot of opportunity here. We have, you know, representation from companies of all sizes, from the, you know, from the very biggest through to small 1 or 2 person teams working from home, and you know 99.9% of games have music in them. So it's about meeting those people who are making the games, thinking about what kinds of games you want to write for, and yeah, making those links.
Okay, and how could you enter that though? How could you enter that world? Because I guess games is sort of like, gaming is a community. So if musicians who might already be gamers, how would they start doing that? How would they get more involved?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I mean, playing games is a good start. I mean, if you're not playing games and you want to think about, you know, writing music for games, you know, what kinds of games are you interested in, and learn about the different genres and that kind of thing. And also the different kinds of music that occurs at different times in games. So if I said to a games composer, make some town music, they would go, oh, I know what sort of, you know, as someone who plays games a lot, I sort of know what town music is, sort of without you having to explain it. But yeah, in terms of meeting people in the sector, you know, we are lucky to have a pretty diverse industry here. And if you look at the gamesmap.uk website that I created, you'll see that there are games companies kind of everywhere. So there's lots of local meetups. There's lots of sort of, you know, you look on meetup.com, there'll be a game jam or a game development meetup nearby, and those are great places to go and meet people who are creating. There's a lot of universities around the countries that have really good student programs for games development, design, artwork, and those people are all out there creating. So there's lots of opportunities to get involved at a very small scale and get your foot in the door and understand what's going on. I think also, you know, obviously meeting people in the real world is a little bit harder at the moment. So there are some really good online communities. I'm part of one called Game Dev London, which is a Discord channel, has a website and a Discord channel, and they've got a really good audio community within there, sort of looking at both sort of game audio and game music. And it's a really active discussion. They have I think it's every 2 weeks, they have a kind of a Zoom catch-up, really, I guess, with about 20 or so composers, and you get people, you know, who are very experienced from the industry, you know, and also, you know, people who are quite new to it. And I think I would also say, having worked in quite a few industries, games is very collaborative, really. People are quite open about their experiences, offering each other advice. You know, we're quite a friendly bunch. So yeah, get talking to other composers, people, you know, talk to them on social media, you know. Go on gamescomposers.co.uk, have a look at who's composing there, start following people on Twitter.
Yeah. Excellent advice. I guess one difference between gaming or gamers and musicians are that gamers by default have to know about tech to an extent, at least, whereas a musician, you don't necessarily need to know about tech, but so maybe there's something where they can learn from one another as well. Thank you very much, Luke. That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you. I mean, we've had now the chance to talk to each one of our panelists, and we are here to discuss the question, tech, is it the answer? And I would say that it depends what question you are asking. So altogether, judging by panelists' answers, it's a very mixed picture. So tech can be the answer to some questions. So it can be the answer if you want to make some money through online teaching, or if you are able to monetize your live stream gigs. It can also be, very importantly, a question, an answer to a question about, can we communicate during lockdown? Can we communicate even though we're in different geographical locations? But at the same time, tech won't replace face-to-face interaction. I wonder, is that a fair summary, panelists? Would anybody like to jump in on that? I'm putting you on the spot. So if we don't have any immediate answers, then we can also go.
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Well, is it a fair answer? Would it be a fair summary to say that tech is not the answer to everything, but it can be potentially the answer to some things?
Yeah, of course. Like,
yeah,
nothing's ever going to replace getting back to real life music teaching, real life touring. But for now, like, it's a thing. It helps you connect to the world, and also we've learned so much from it that we aren't going to then suddenly forget. Like, for me, I love it that when I go live, I have people all around the world connecting, and when I start going back out to do real shows, there's no way I want to lose that. So I'm planning a whole bunch of hybrid shows for next year where you'll have people in the room with me having fun, but then we'll have a big, we'll have that screen behind us with people connecting from all around the world, and that's magical. So tech's definitely the answer to moving forwards and expressing yourself. Whether or not it's the answer to being able to sustain a living as a professional musician during a long-term pandemic, we're trying, we're doing our best.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's very much in development as well. How do you monetize it, and what are the different models? Definitely. We do have some questions. So anybody watching, please continue to put your questions in the chat. We had a question earlier for John, actually, and that question was, can online real-time music making work for a choir rehearsal online?
Yeah, so I saw this question. It's an interesting one. So something I would say the technology for online real-time music allows, you know, multiple people. So I talked about duo examples, right? If you consider extending that to 3 people, okay, there's 2 ways of connecting. One of them is to have a triangle connection like this, where everyone is connected to everybody else, okay? So I'm connected to 2 people, the other person's connected to 2 people, you know. You can see how that requires 2 connections for each person. And if you extend that up to a square, you know, or more, suddenly everybody's internet needs to be fantastically capable. The other way to do it is to have a server in the middle where everyone connects to the server, right? So then everybody only needs 1 connection. So it is possible to extend it and scale it up to a lot of people. But I would say it gets more, you have to be a bit more careful setting it up, you know, the more people you add, and then you're also more reliant on each person having a decent internet connection. So somebody who's, you know, everyone would have to test their connection in advance, and of course you have to tell more people how to do it. But I think with certain of the more user-friendly examples of this software, they're perfectly capable of giving it a go like that. But you'd have to just educate the whole choir about what they can expect and what they can't expect, and how they should test their internet speed, etc.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We also have some questions for Luke. So, Luke, how do you get gigs performing music for video games?
Well, I think it's going to be much the same as the answer I gave before. In terms of the performance side, I think obviously there's, if you're working as a sort of an orchestral musician and you're part of an ensemble that's going to be hired by a composer that or the games company via the composer who's written some pieces, there's plenty of that kind of work in there. I think also it's worth saying there's a huge diversity of music within games. It's not, you tend to think either it's all this kind of sumptuous orchestral stuff that you'll get in these big sort of role play games, or you get the Nintendo world where it's all blips and bloops and all that kind of stuff. But actually there's all kinds of music in there. I guess anything from across the world, whether, I can think of games with sort of Middle Eastern music or African music. So, whatever kind of instrumental work you do, or whatever kind of performances you create, there's opportunity there. And I think it's about finding those games, and I'm thinking about finding the companies that make those sort of things. I think if you're someone who plays, something from, I guess, a smaller genre of music, I think it's about finding the content and talking to those people. But there's definitely opportunity out there.
Excellent, thank you. And there's another question which is very interesting. As some AIs, artificial intelligence, can compose hundreds of hours of music for games in far less time, is this a deterrent to try and break into the gaming composition sector at this point?
Yeah, okay. I think my answer there would be, is it AIs any more likely to take over making music for film? Are they any more likely to take over making pop music? I mean, there's you can live stream 24/7 black metal that's created by AI online now, which is it's something I do if I've had a particularly long day. I think the real answer is, games are no different than any other medium. The music in them is created by people with an emotional content. It is there to be part of that experience. It tells that story. It's that narrative. I don't think that music created by AIs is going to fill that void anytime soon. It has its uses, and sure, maybe there's instances where it might fit in as temporary placeholder music or library music or royalty-free music at places. But I think for the vast majority of games, that human touch is definitely needed. Without the music, games would be a silent place. There'd be nightclubs with no music, in that sense. So that human part is essential.
Can I jump in there, Luke? Sorry, so I would agree with what Luke just said, and I think especially in the game sector, it's especially the case because at the very high end in the AAA games, they have the money to have a big name composer, and it's part of the prestige of the thing. But the same at the lower end for the indie games market, and I'm aware of this area a little bit. People like the sort of cottage industry sort of quaint thing about indie games, and it would be a completely different thing to replace that with AI generated music, So I think at both ends of the sort of cost spectrum of the games industry, there's a driving force for real people generating real music. I think that's
yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, there's so many games where the composer is actually as much of a draw as anything else. I think about a UK games musician who I know quite well called Chipzel, and she makes kind of this Game Boy sort of chiptune music. But she's kind of a bit of a celebrity in our world, and having her on your game is a real draw, and it brings that kind of energy and a kind of aesthetic to the product overall. And I think that's something that people really appreciate and and look for. There's loads of examples of games out there with amazing soundtracks. I've got quite a collection of soundtracks on vinyl these days, and it's I can't see it humans being replaced quite yet.
Excellent answer. Thank you very much. We also had a more general question, which could be answered by any one of you, but what is your top tip for people who want to improve their tech skills? Pippa, what do you think? How can people improve their tech skills?
Well, for me, when I was starting all this online teaching, it was a case of just doing it and trying it out with people and seeing what works best. I got myself a good microphone, which actually I use for recording music. I don't use it for teaching. I'm just on my phone at the moment, and it works perfectly fine. And just, yeah, I didn't do any reading into it or anything. I just did it. And I wasn't tech savvy before any of this. I am not a tech person at all, but I think I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
With it, yeah.
Absolutely. Sandra, what about you? With Not of Robin, did you train your music therapist in terms of, you know, what might you have advice or knowledge might you have given to them in terms of what they needed to know in terms of tech?
So for us, it was very much in the first couple of weeks, just try. And then it was, okay, what have we learned? Okay, what are we not going to do again? Okay, so it's that do test, that do review circle that you have to keep doing. But now I think it was about 12 weeks in, we realized, okay, there's some key gems in here that we're going to train across the organization. And what we'll do is every 3 months is the same thing. What gems, what do we need training? And actually in our September intake of students, there'll actually be a focus on, okay, what does online music therapy look like? But again, it will be a evolving part of our training.
Yeah, knowledge sharing, very, very important. And I think what all of you said is trying it out to see what works best. Shlomo, do you want to say something about what are your top tips for people who want to improve their tech skills?
Yeah, my tip is don't try and get it perfect from the beginning. Like, the perfection doesn't exist. So all you're going to be able to do is a series of less terrible things. So I'd say don't let there be a big entry barrier. Just go and start playing around with small micro improvements to what you've got set up already, and very gradually you'll start to get more and more confident with it. Like, that's all I did. Like, I've been meaning to mess around with the green screen for so long, and I didn't because I was, I guess, afraid. But the minute you just try it, like, it starts off not really being that great, and gradually they say suck until you don't they? Just keep being bad at it until you're gradually, one day you realize, oh, I've improved to the point where I'm actually quite good. Same as you went with learning music.
Yeah. But it's also about the human aspect, isn't it? It is kind of, you know, we all try things, we all fail and we all get better, but it's also nice, I think, for an audience to be on the journey together with the musician who's just trying something out. You know, I think, again, it is all about communication. I think this is all we have time for. So thank you very, very much to all of our listeners. Thank you for your questions and for listening in. And an absolutely massive thank you to the panelists for their contributions. I think we've covered a very, very wide ground, very wide area of different topics. Anybody, please do continue using the hashtag empowered musician, and the next session starts at 12 o'clock and it will be on COVID-19 and its impact on gender, race and disability. So thank you very much indeed, and hope to see you again all soon. Thank you.